Hi, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Katie Morris, Managing Director of the Purple House Clinic. Hi, Katie. Thanks for coming on today.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Well, look, I just to start off, first of all, just so people don't read too much into the name of the business, the Purple House bit, maybe, and explain what the Purple House Clinic it does as a business, or what it offers your customers or clients, and that'd be a good start.
Yeah, fine. We offer two main streams of services. So one is mental health services, so specialist assessments and therapies for people that are experiencing mental health difficulties, and that's children as well as adults. And then the other mainstream of services that we offer is for neurodiversity. So we offer a few different specialist types of assessments, for example, autism assessments, ADHD assessments, and ones that are often undertaken by educational psychologists, such as dyslexia assessments.
Okay. And what percentage of the business is catering to children, you're under 18s, if you like? Is that, I'm guessing that has grown over the last few years, that side of it.
Yeah, it's a really big part of our business. It's at least 50%, and in some of the clinics, they often have a slightly different mix of services, within the network. And within some of the clinics, it may be slightly more than that. But certainly, COVID, I think, highlighted a lot of concerns for different reasons. So perhaps on the kind of the neurodiversity side and the learning side, parents had children at home for the first time, observing, their learning in particular, and that increased demand for those types of assessments. And also in terms of mental health, obviously, the COVID period put a lot of strain on people's mental health in general, but particularly children went through a lot during that time, and all of the disruption that they had to their everyday lives. And then on top of that, of course, you had problems with people accessing services. So the NHS already had long waiting lists, but they got bigger during that time. So all of that for us meant increased demand.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that just myself, just over the last couple of years, 3 years. It's everyone is talking about mental health. Everyone's starting to address it. Everyone's speaking more honestly and truthfully about it. I mean, all of that can only be a really, really good thing. And then off the back of all of that, you're actually providing a service that can genuinely help. I mean, it's good to talk about it and be open and honest with family, friends, and trusted sources, but to actually go and get professional help is sometimes absolutely necessary and the right thing to do. And I would say, thinking back 3 or 4 years, even 3 or 4 to 5 years, it was really hard to see either people talking about it, everyone seemed to just hide it away, and secondly, it wasn't obvious about where you went to get help, and there's been just a massive change. I mean, would you agree, Katie? That's look, I'm not in the profession. I don't, you know, I don't have mental health problems or anything like that. But it's just what I observe. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think it's been a tidal wave of change. Again, I think initiated through COVID, and maybe that unusual experience that we all went through was part of a prompt for people being more open, and there was such kind of strong changes in terms of connection on social media, between people. It was a very supportive time in many ways, wasn't it? And I think, yeah, awareness has increased massively during that time, both for mental health difficulties and also neurodiversity. And with that has meant that the range of options for people getting help has increased as well. So there was a lot of people that have entered the mental well-being space in terms of providing services. So that's been interesting as well. So some of it's been very good and some of it's been not so good because, of course, it's opens a door for people that perhaps aren't qualified and promising certain things that they're not qualified to do so. So that's been one of the shifts that we've noticed as well.
And there's a franchise side to your business now, which is the Purple House Clinic, the franchise. Before we come on to that and talk, and I do want to talk about that, I'm really interested in that side. Can you just tell me a bit about your background, how, where you've come from, what you've studied, and just why you've ended up in this place that you're in?
Yeah, sure. So I started off undertaking a undergraduate degree in psychology, which is a general course, and then decided to go down the route of clinical psychology, and did a master's degree and then a doctorate degree in that. It's quite a long route to training. I wasn't qualified until I was 28. So it's a bit of an old slog in terms of a career to pursue. But a very rewarding one once you get there. And as most people would do when they qualify, I entered the NHS and worked within a specialist service for children and adolescents, and very much enjoyed working within that team, and helping lots of people with various mental health issues, but specialised myself in working with complex trauma. So that was my background in terms of a clinician.
Right. Well, just tell me, how many years does it take to qualify? I mean, people normally think about GPs and the length of time it takes to become a GP and so on. How does that equate with where how many years is it, that whole process to get you to where you are?
Yeah, so I did 8 years worth of degree study, so 3 years undergrad, 2 years masters, and 3-year doctorate, and then a bit of a time in the middle, gaining work experience. The doctorate part, the qualifying part, is very hard to get onto. There's only a limited number of places, so usually people have to work a couple of years, doing voluntary work and things to gain experience in order to get on that course. So yeah, it was about 10 years for me from start to finish.
Yeah, so it's definitely a journey that once you kind of need to make a decision that you're going on that journey, right? You don't want to get to the end and be like, oh, this is not the right thing for me. That'd be
No,
difficult. So
that's right. And I
yeah,
think there's a bit of a running joke within the profession that it's not necessarily the most skilled people that get there in the end. It's the ones that persevere the most because it's such a long-winded career route. So yes, you do have to really want it and keep going and take a lot of knockbacks, in the process because it's very hard to get onto the courses.
and so then, Katie, take me from that point. So that's how your career started in the NHS and the qualifying for that. But when did the thought of starting your own business, doing your own thing, when did that come into it, and how did that happen?
Yeah, well, it was probably relatively soon into my qualified career. So I was probably only about 3 years in, and became quite disillusioned with the NHS, as a lot of people do, sadly. For all the reasons that people commonly talk about, getting bogged down in systems and red tape, and for me, it was quite an emotional journey because I could see the impact of all of that red tape and difficulties in the system to the people that mattered, which was the young people and families that we worked with. And I found it very upsetting that we couldn't provide the services that we felt they needed. And I think after a while, it got on top of me and I couldn't see, I was quite early on in my career in a way, and I couldn't see me, working in the NHS until I was 70. I just thought this is not viable, and was too stressful and too frustrating. And I realised that I couldn't change the system. I realised that I probably tried in the early days. I was probably a bit feisty, and I would speak up in meetings, and there was the odd time I probably sent an email to the chief exec of the trust and things like that. But I realised quite early on that I wasn't going to be able to change the system.
and that's when you decided leave the system, start your own system in a way, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking back now, I don't know, I was perhaps 31, 32, and there's lots of naivety associated with that. And when I look back, I think, especially now, having created my own system and being on that journey, I actually have far more respect and understanding for the NHS system, because, of course, then I've stood in the shoes of managers and execs and realised how hard it is to create a system that works well. And of course, I have such understanding and gratefulness for the fact that we have the NHS, and what an amazing thing it is, in general, for the UK. It's one of the best health services in the world. But the problems that were there for me were enough to do something different.
And so the Purple House Clinic was born, right? And that was what, 10, just over 10 years, well, 11 years, coming up to 11 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was about, I'd done a bit of private work beforehand, but it was 2013. That year we just went all out, really. So we were heavily pregnant with our first child, and my husband worked in the education system, and we just decided to uproot and move and give in our jobs and start from scratch, really, with a tiny baby, as you do.
Wow. And so Katie, was that you and your partner? Were you, like, I know you're co-founder of the business.
Yeah.
Is that the other co-founder?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Steve, my husband, is the co-founder, and his background was in education, so felt similar to, sort of frustrations with that system, and yeah, we decided to do something new together, and we've done it together. We've built the franchise system together.
Brilliant. And the name, let's talk about quickly about the name. So the Purple House Clinic, how did you come up with that, and how did you kind of decide on that, and how many different names do you remember? Because it's I've got two kids, and you obviously, as you say, you were probably thinking about names for your baby, right? And
Yeah.
at the same time, and this is another kind of a baby, a new business. And were you kind of doing the same things at the same time, going, well, here's a list of kids' names, which we don't know yet, and here's a list of business names, and we need to pick on both sides at some point. How did that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we had at least two false starts, I think, because I was doing a bit of private work with the same, limited company before we actually went out there on our own and developed our own service. I was just doing a bit of private work on the side, if you like, whilst working the NHS. And I think we had a couple of false starts with names. So I think the very first one was Making Sense. Yeah, I really don't like now. So I'm so glad we changed that. I can't remember what the other one was now, but probably equally as bad. Yeah, Purple House was actually suggested by a dear friend of mine, and the rationale was that the colour purple is often associated with therapeuticness, if that's a word, and it just feels nice and calming and kind of soothing and welcoming, and a house, should be, it's not unfortunately for everyone, but it should be a sanctuary and a place where you feel safe. So we wanted the name to kind of create a sense that of calmness and being therapeutic and safety. And it was important for us that the name was approachable for children as well. Because, if you take the example of the old company name, Making Sense, that's a terrible name for children to say, oh, I'm going to Making Sense, to get some help. But saying I'm going to Purple House to get some help is much more kind of age appropriate, I think, for them.
No, I love it as a name. I'm always intrigued about how people come to choose a name and a brand for a new business. So no, that's a good story. And so that got started. And how quickly did you gain ground with that business? Like tell me a bit about the kind of the maybe uphill struggles, bumps in the road you had as you built that business. And it's obviously been going now for for nearly 11 years. So
Yeah.
it's worked out. But yeah, what were some of the struggles in the beginning?
Yeah, so it did, build up very quickly. We had a vision from the start that we didn't want it to be about just me working in private practice, which of course a lot of people do. There's lots of sole practitioners that are working out there and just have the business as themselves. But we didn't want that. We wanted to grow a team of clinicians from different disciplines, and to be able to offer a range of services, because of course yourself as an individual, you only have a limited range of particular expertise. So that was our vision. And I'd had a lot of contacts through working through the NHS, and the way that people often work in private practice is that it's very common to be a self-employed contractor. So often people are working in the NHS, and then they'll work for a company, a private provider, and as a self-employed contractor for maybe like 3 hours a week, something quite small like that. So we built up a team of, we call them associates, these clinicians in our business. And so we built up a team of associates fairly quickly over the first year or two, I think something like 20, 25 clinical associates. So it meant that we were offering quite a broad range of services, and the business was growing really. So we went through various transitions, kind of upscaling premises and things like that to catch up with it. But then at some point, kind of along the way, maybe I think it was around 2016, because it was when we were having our second child, as these things always happen. We thought about franchising. And that came about really because there had been a lot of growth in the business, but we felt that the geographical spread was becoming quite broad, and we were losing touch of the kind of personal relationships, both with the clinicians and also with the clients. And we wanted to grow, but we wanted to grow in a way that retained that quality control and those personal relationships. And somebody told us about franchising, and we thought, well, what a great model, because it enables growth. You can have enormous ambition with owning a franchise network, which is great. But it means that your franchise owners can nurture and those individual relationships and retain that quality control locally. And we just loved the idea of having local clinics that were locally owned across the country. We never wanted to be a referral agency where it was all faceless and kind of based in London, and that just wasn't what our vision was at all.
Right. And so franchising was born effectively here, and so yeah, it's all tying in nicely with your second child, and then so what was your franchising journey like? So you came across franchising, you obviously looked at it as a model and it was like ticked a lot of boxes. How did you then move that forward and actually become a brand or a franchise that you could actually go out and offer a business model to people in other parts of the country?
Yeah, well, it actually got initiated in the end, through a bit of a coincidence. So we started thinking about it in 2016. We were kind of had it in the background for a while, and then at some point in 2017, an old friend of mine that I trained with contacted me. She'd been watching our journey on social media, and she basically just sent me a message that literally said, "Can you franchise me up in Scotland?" And she didn't know we were thinking about franchising, so it was a pure coincidence. And so we were like, yeah, of course, great, let's do it. So that's what we did, and they opened up in January 2018. So that was the start of our franchising journey.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, there's no better way to get into franchising than to have a pilot, what we call a pilot franchisee like that, because that's where you learn so much about how you need to structure things, communication,
Yeah,
processes, operationally, branding, all of that kind of stuff. It all comes together at that point. And
yeah.
so, and at what point were you, I guess, really truly confident in the model that you could actually go out and maybe put this in front of other people that you either wanted to, or attract people that were total strangers but obviously had to, they had to be qualified, I guess, to become franchisees to a certain level. And I was going to come on to that, but yeah, cover that for me first if you could.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important because you have to, like you say, you have to prove the model, and to make sure that this can be rolled out. So we had that first franchisee in 2018, and actually 6 months later we had two more that followed, and they were existing people that worked as associates for us in our own practice, and they wanted their own franchises. So we ended up having three franchises on that initial pilot that ran for 2.5 years. And that was like, most new franchisors, that was an opportunity to refine our systems and learn about what it was like when you implement those systems over a larger scale, and when you're trying to communicate those systems to other people. And of course, everything has to be documented, obviously, and you're building this network for scale then at that point. So that was, a really informative process. And of course, when we reached the end of that, we were then right bang smack in the middle of COVID. And I suppose ordinarily, at that point, we would have started thinking about recruitment. But in 2020, it was, as for, most franchise networks, it was a time of survival, and we had to focus on prioritizing support for the franchisees that we already had, and ensuring that, they would get through that time. And indeed, our own clinic that we still had at that time. So that was our priority in that year. And then in terms of personal life, at the back end of 2020, I then became pregnant with our third child, who we had in July 21. And so recruitment was paused then for obvious reasons. So we didn't then start thinking about it really until the back end of 22. So relatively recently, in terms of, okay, let's build this franchise network now. But what that has meant is that, we had a good 4-5 years of really consolidating all of those systems. And within that period, we did sneak in a fourth franchisee, I think weeks before I gave birth, actually, who had approached us and wanted to join. But those franchisees, those first four, they grew beyond all expectation in that time. And as we were saying right early on, that COVID changed a lot of things, increased demands, and we've changed our services. We've adapted over time as well. We're doing a lot more neurodiversity work than we ever did in the beginning as well, kind of adapting to demand.
Okay, no, that's great. And tell me about the profile of your franchisees. I'm guessing they have to be qualified to a certain level. You're a qualified clinical psychologist, right? But your franchisees, what's the absolute baseline qualification kind of levels that someone needs to have to be able to consider the Purple House Clinic as as a franchise and as a business in their area?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist. We don't just accept clinical psychologists. There are several different types of practicing psychologists. For example, forensic psychologists, counselling, educational. So we accept all of those and other mental health professionals as well. So that might include mental health nurses or occupational therapists, psychiatrists, so also or psychotherapists. So people that are, well qualified within that field.
And so you don't have to be a doctor as such. I guess what
No,
I'm, yeah,
no, that's
you don't.
right. Yeah, there's a bit more of a range there.
Okay. All right. Good. No, that's good. And what's in terms of the UK, how many franchisees do you believe it would support? What does that kind of growth model look like? What's your vision? Because obviously the Purple House Clinic and what you're trying to achieve, it's aimed at helping people. So, I guess that's one way to look at a vision is the more people you can help, the better, in the right way, in the right place, in the right environment, et cetera, et cetera. That's a great vision. But turning that into actual numbers and locations around the UK, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so our model is very much about having substantial services that have large multidisciplinary teams. So it's that sense of it's a place that you can go where you can get a range of expertise and a range of services, and all of the people that work there are highly qualified. So in terms of kind of territories, how that tends to kind of map out is that each territory is about kind of population size of around about 500,000. So it does tend to be, your cities more. We have a vision to go up to 23 franchises within the next 3 years. So we've actually got 7 now. We've recruited 3 in the last 6 months. So our recruitment plan is roughly 6 a year for the next few years, and we will be targeting those major cities.
Yeah, no, that's no, that's great. And what would you say from a franchise sense? What's been the biggest kind of hurdle that you faced and obviously overcome, either personally or as a company?
Um, I think probably the biggest kind of question mark or the hardest decision was when we decided to close our own original clinic at the start of 2022. And it was largely a personal decision. So by that point, we had 3 children, which the youngest of which was a baby. And, we were in the position where we were running 2 companies. And although they were obviously related, actually the roles of running those 2 were very, very different. So one was a clinic, and I was being a psychologist and managing other, clinicians day to day and managing referrals and things. And then the other was franchising, and that is a completely different career in its own right. And I remember it's probably the best piece of advice that I've ever been given in franchising, which was right in 2016 when we first connected with a franchise solicitor, and she said franchising is a career in its own right. And that's something that I've definitely kind of learned through time. And it was just at that point where I felt I had to do either or, and I had to make a choice. And obviously, because of the demands of family life as well. And we chose to close our clinic rather than to franchise it out, because I didn't want to close doors for the future. So our territory was in the place where we live, our clinic was in the place where we live, and I didn't want to be in a situation in the future where actually I couldn't then reopen a clinic, if I wanted to on my doorstep. And actually the premises that we had was very handy, and we converted that to our head office premises. So but it was a hard decision to make, because you put a lot into growing any business, and so it was kind of like shutting our baby down, and of course making that decision to go in a slightly different direction in terms of my own career. So it was a big decision.
Yeah, no, I think what you've said there is really good advice for anyone listening who is either looking to franchise their business or is in, the early stages of being a franchisor, is you do have to understand, and you will realize that franchising is a totally different business to the business that you started, built successfully, and have franchised. And at some point there is a choice to be made in that: do you keep running effectively what's the corporate business alongside the franchise business, or do you throw yourself in as a franchisor at that point? And it's obviously clear what you did, and I think a lot of people try and juggle both, and that can cause a lot of stress. I know that, talking to lots of people. So it's very, very good advice to understand
Yeah,
the
and it
pressure,
was, as soon as it was hard to make that choice, but because it impacted on people, it impacted on the staff that we had, although we were able to transfer most of them to a neighbouring clinic, and of course the clients as well. It was a really super hard decision to make, and quite distressing, having to make those decisions. But in terms of the wider picture, it was 100% the right decision, and it brought a lot of relief personally to me once that decision was made. And it meant that I could put 100% into the franchising. And ultimately we felt we owed that to the franchisees as well, because by this point they built sizable businesses and they needed that support. So it was the right decision.
Yeah. And if anyone's listening, Katie, or knows anyone who this business franchise would appeal to or make sense for, can you just tell us where the best place to start to get some information about this would be, like a website address, or anything that would be helpful for people to go to?
Yeah, so the best place is to look on our franchising webpage. So it's a page off our main website, which is www.purplehouseclinic.co.uk. And if you just go to join us and then franchising, you can read all about the opportunity, and you can read videos and testimonials and all sorts. And then we'd be very happy to follow that up with conversations with people.
Yeah, no, that's great, Katie, and hopefully someone listening will get in touch, because what you're, in terms of finding franchisees for you, I know what it's like, because I've been working with franchisors for nearly 20 years, and you're after a very niche type of person, that they've got to be able to tick a lot of boxes. And some franchises can appeal to almost anyone walking on any street. Yours is pretty niche and specialized, and you need a special person as well. So it makes it more difficult on one hand, but on another hand, you know exactly kind of what you're looking for, so that can make it easier. So there's a bit of a, you got a bit of a double-edged sword on that. So yeah. And what does, as a franchisor, how do you define success? Like, what's the, if you and Steve are sitting down over dinner, and you're saying, or you're thinking, if you are already, or if you're going to be, and you're saying, wow, we've made it. Like, what will that mean, or what does that already mean to you? What does that success mean?
Well, I mean, I think success is a very personal thing, certainly, and it may be different for Steve than it is for me. So I can only talk for myself. But for me, it's about people. So first and foremost, it's about those people that we're helping, and that we're providing something extraordinarily valuable to them and for the rest of their lives. The most rewarding thing ever is when I read testimonials from clients. And the thing is about being in this line of work is that you can literally change people's lives, and it's very humbling and amazing to read those stories. So I think, although maybe I can't put a number on it, just reaching as many people as possible, and giving them those valuable services is a large part of that concept of success. On from a kind of more business perspective, I think like most business owners, you have kind of targets and KPIs and things that you're aiming for. And for me, if we were to have around about kind of 30 clinics within the UK, that would feel absolutely amazing. And something that I don't think any other business is doing in our field. I don't think there is any other organisation that has such a large coverage over the UK of this type of provision. So yeah, so that would feel awesome.
Well, I think, Katie, that's a great note to end on, actually. And it's been really lovely talking to you and getting to understand your story like properly, because there's only so much you can find out reading online or looking on a LinkedIn profile. So it's just been great to understand all of that. And I wish you really so well in the future. And it's a brilliant, lovely business to be involved in. As you say, you're helping people, and there's a great need for it. So, again, on that side, just I love it. So yeah, so thanks so much, Katie, and hopefully we'll meet up sometime in the future. Franchising is a small world,
Absolutely.
really, in many senses. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, thanks, Katie. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, you too, and thanks very much for having me. Take care. Bye now.